Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for December 1st, 2022. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan here in Montreal, Canada. Mark, great to talk to you and very excited for an exciting podcast that we're going to be discussing today.
Yeah, well, it's hard to believe it's already December. The Christmas lights are out in full in Sao Paulo, and they've even put snow everywhere. You know, we have artificial snow blowing in the street, even though it's the middle of summer.
Well, you probably got more snow than we do in Montreal. The landscape is barren outside my living room window right now as I look across the park, and we're expecting a record amount of rain today. So my jealousy for you having the white stuff on the ground knows no bounds.
Well, okay, let's talk about the subject and the interview this week, because we've got a great guest. It's Steve Mosser, who's the chief executive at Sensée. Now, Sensée has been on the pod before, I believe, when Mark Walton was the chief executive previously. And Sensée is well known as a work from home BPO. So all of their agents are work from home completely. And they're pretty much based in the UK, working on a lot of different UK contracts. Steve himself is based in London. But we wanted to sort of take the conversation beyond, the typical home working, how do you make it work, all the sort of stuff that we've been covering ever since the pandemic, really. And we really looked into culture. How do you actually get teams of people to work together and feel that they are real teams, even though they're all in disparate locations? I mean, is this something that you've talked to some other clients about, Peter?
Very much so, very much so. And I think that Steve comes to the table with an amazing background. I first got to know him about 10 years ago when he was in the role of CEO of Sensée. And he took a bit of a leave of absence, but he's back now with a vengeance. And really, Sensée is going to be in great hands with Steve and the legacy he brings to the entire work from home dynamic. And Mark, to your question, yes, this is very much what you're talking about and what Steve's talking about, very much on the minds of the buyers and very much on the minds of the outsourcers that are looking to try and migrate to a more structural view of how work from home can be done, whether it's a hybrid environment, whether it's fully virtualized. But the idea about culture and the idea about bringing people together from disparate locations is really on the minds about how CX can be done in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, because I think that most of the debate at the moment, if you search, The Atlantic, The Economist, all the business press, it's all about how do you make hybrid working function correctly. And it seems that everybody's got a different suggestion for hybrid working. But what Steve's kind of saying is it's not so much whether you're in the office, in a cafe, working at home. You need to accept that actually your workforce is completely distributed. How do you get them to feel as if they are a team? And I think that that's one of the key questions here.
And it's very true. And look, Mark, the reality too is that the jury is still out on a lot of aspects of hybrid working. And that's why, as you say, you ask a bunch of people for their opinions on it, you're going to get a bunch of different answers. There is still no magic bullet. There's still no formula that you can really point to that will demonstrate how hybrid can work. And figuring out the best possible way for an organization to develop that type of culture where people are going to feel part of a team, whether they're in center or whether they're working remotely, is going to be crucial. And that's where I think somebody with Steve's experience and really proactivity and positivity when it comes to home-based working really is going to make a difference in terms of an organization like Sensée developing and really pioneering this approach.
Yeah, and I think that, just before we go to the interview, it's worth saying that you just talked about Steve's experience, but I think he's actually been with Sensée for almost 2 decades. And so, he's got 2 decades experience of directly managing and designing work from home systems and getting these teams to work effectively. He certainly hasn't just arrived at this because of the pandemic.
Spot on, exactly. Sensée was really the organization that was the trailblazer for home-based working in the United Kingdom. And I can think back to when I started as an analyst working in the CX space in the early 2000s. It was really one of the 2 or 3 companies around the world that you would see as the go-to when you wanted to find out about how this type of CX model operated. And moving into the next 12 months, I'm really expecting a lot of interesting and great things from Sensée.
Well, let's go straight to the interview with Steve Mosser from Sensée on the culture of making work from home really work. Steve, it's great to get you on the podcast. Now, I know I've known Sensée for quite a while, and so I know that you've been operating as a almost exclusively work from home company long before the pandemic arrived. So what actually happened to the business when COVID did arrive? What did you need to do?
Hi, thanks for having us, Mark, and glad to be part of the CX Files today. So first, just small correction. We have been exclusively working from home. So that's been our entirety of our model, and everybody in the business has been working from home since our humble beginnings many moons ago. And yeah, so we've been working on a distributed basis and we managed to virtualize the entirety of the employee life cycle back in 2011. So that meant that when the pandemic hit for us, really nothing changed, except we got horribly busy, as you can probably imagine, because as an outsourced operation, we're there to augment and support our partners' own operations. And while they had to, get everybody at home as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I was thinking of that sort of situation because you've got a number of clients. They must have turned to you for advice and said, well, you've been doing this for more than a decade. So what kind of tips can you recommend? I mean, what were the sort of things that you advised in that kind of situation then?
So, I mean, firstly, it was don't panic. We're here. We can help, of course. Now we have a list of different applications we built over the years to support staff remotely, be it from a security and engagement, a productivity monitoring, etc. point of view. So we basically, those clients, many of our partners turn to us, say, look, you're our partner, can you help us? And we said, yes, of course. So we helped them plugged our app stack to get their people at home. And for the likes of SSE, for example, we had 2,000 of their workers within 30 days at home. Because we try to promote best practice for 100% at home staff, they used our app stack and it worked great for them.
So that was really like them using your technology to enable them to create a virtual office.
Yeah, absolutely. And that technology is now wrapped into what's the business CloudWorks, which I'm leading now, which is the productization of the ecosystem that's underpin our alternative 100% at home outsourcing proposition. So it's technology to source, onboard, train, engage, secure, coordinate, manage, track remotely. And it's as foolproof as it needs to be to run an entire operation with, we have 1,400 employees at home, working for the majority of them in regulated activities. So, I think that's testimonial about how far we've taken it.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because one of the key issues I keep reading about all the time is this post-pandemic business environment. During the pandemic, everybody had an emergency, everybody had to go home. But now you see different companies with different ideas about how are they going to operate now and what kind of hybrid environment are they going to offer to their employees. And it seems that nobody agrees on the perfect kind of formula. If you listen to Bruce Daisley's podcast, they're talking about Wednesday +1. So everybody is in the office on Wednesdays and you choose another day to be in. But it seems the tech industry is completely different from other industries. And I guess from your perspective, it actually works better if everybody's at home. But do we need to think again about this kind of hybrid solution? Is there a perfect hybrid model, or do you think that actually we need to be thinking about making work from home better?
I think there's a bit of both. The pandemic definitely and unfortunately coerced most businesses that were reticent with work from home previously to embrace it, right? They improvised solutions in a hurry because they needed to, and I think everybody deserves a huge pat on the back, for getting their people and their businesses through that chapter. But I don't think that many organizations experience work from home the way it's supposed to be. And we've certainly always promoted the idea that, look, work from home is not for everybody anyway. There are people that just thrive by working from home, and there are others that absolutely hate it. Some people that can't, they don't really mind, but that's probably the minority. I think in terms of CX and contact center operations, what we need to think about is, previously part of the barrier was that the barriers to entry and the inhibitors to work from home were really, really high for frontline staff, customer-facing staff, and therefore that's why there was so much resistance to it. In terms of the question, in terms of rethinking hybrid, we talked a lot back in 2020. 21. We were talking about the where of work, and the freedom of the where of work now being democratized, so to speak, because now even the front line can benefit from it. It's not just for upper and sometimes middle management, and now there's also this notion of the when of work. And what we've always done at Sensée was, look, the where is your home. I mean, it's anywhere you want it to be, all right? But it's at home. There's no office for us. There's never been an office, bar for client meetings every once in a while. But it was giving people that freedom of the where of work, and then we've also always been of the freedom of the when of work, which is one of our key intellectual properties is team tonic, and enables people to decide when they work. Obviously there's constraints, but we don't impose schedules. So I think when we're thinking about hybrid, people just thinking of the where, and they're not thinking of the when. And that is probably, this notion of work from home that we've always fought against, which is this work-life collision. Which is when my place of work is my most personal space, aka my home. If we don't address the issue of imposing work time, again, the when of work to individuals, then it's inevitable there's going to be that collision of work and life. And so it's incredibly important not just to think of hybrid as where should people work, but also when. And figuring out the formula for that. And there's no one size fits all. There's absolutely zero. It's not like that. But today, what businesses and what we generally recommend is say, look, the best thing to do is first look at the makeup of what is your existing people and your existing business, poll them to understand where do they want to be, where do they feel it's right, and why. Because it's important to, if it's the right place for home for you is the right place, it's important to understand why, and then also ask them around the when. And from there you can start making a map about, okay, what is the right formula? But it's certainly, again, not a right formula for everybody in the business. It's individually based, because we will all have different preferences.
Yeah, and you talked there about some of the advantages for the employees, such as flexibility over working hours, not requiring, not having the need to commute to an office, and all this kind of thing. And I think that's where we normally think about work from home, is all the advantages for the employees. But what's your sort of elevator pitch when you go and talk to a potential client about why they should be considering work from home CX agents rather than a traditional contact center?
It's very easy: faster, cheaper, better, greener. In Business 101, they say faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper, greater, choose two. in any proposition, you can only do two. And actually, this is the only business model I've known. And that's why, it tinkled my interest in the beginning as well, was actually can achieve all three. Plus, you have the greener, which encapsulates the corporate social responsibility for all these disadvantaged communities that can't access mainstream workplaces, right? So there, from a business point of view, flexibility gets you ultimately the cheaper aspect, all right? Because if you do it right, again, if you do, we do micro staffing, it's not the subject of today, but it enables you to staff with such granularity that it gets rid of idle time. And that's a huge saving in most organizations. As we all know, as a contact center agent, we desperately try to keep people busy, but we can't control customer demand. So that's the real financial gain is on the flexibility. And then on quality, because there's just such a huge opportunity to tap in new communities of workers, and also because if you make the home environment, or you thrive to help the person create the right environment, they'll be more productive and more loyal than they can ever be inside an office. I'm sorry, that was an elevator, but there you go.
Yeah. No, it's a long elevator, but that's fine. There's a lot of floors in this building. You were talking a little bit there before about making home working work actually better, rather than the kind of emergency situation that everybody saw in the pandemic. And I was thinking about this in terms of team bonding and culture, and how do you build that? Traditionally, the contact center environment has been a lot of fun. You see, people going out together after work, or wearing costumes to work, and it's a very social environment. So how do you sort of create that team bonding when everybody is in disparate locations?
If it's okay, I'm going to dissect that question a little bit, because there's a lot of things here. So first is when the pandemic hit, obviously the businesses that had bricks and mortar put those people that were in bricks and mortar and would naturally probably like better to work from an office and be social creatures and use the workplace as a social place, and then put them at home. All right. And this is where obviously that challenge you compound the challenge of how do you bond people that are distributed, because especially if it's the same people that used to be gathered. Yeah. So that really worsens the effect here. Now, to answer the question about what strategies or techniques and how do you ensure that you have a culture and all that, the answer may be surprising, but in our case, when we started Sensée, we actually found that people did it naturally. They naturally sought, and back then there was, Facebook, was just starting. There was no kind of big, there was Skype and stuff like that. But basically, the communities created it themselves to some extent. We nudged them, But what was really surprising is that actually people sought each other, and created communities around passions, hobbies, geographical proximity, and they went and did their barbecues and hang out when or the pub whenever they wanted to gather. But they would naturally have less, desire to do that, because they started distributed. So it was, how much do people want to be together? And in terms of what's been surprising is that very early on, I remember somebody that had been working at contacts, and she says, she was just amazed, and she's still with us today, and she was saying, I've never felt closer to my team in the business, despite having never met people physically, in her case, because she was in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, and all that. But so I think, we sometimes kind of, I think, overbake challenges, and think about, how are we going to keep the culture? And actually, it's a false problem, in my opinion. Well, in my experience as well.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you think then that what we need is maybe to reframe the entire debate? Because if you look at the business press, it seems to be it's really binary. It's either, you're all in the office or you're all work from home. And how do we? It's always about how do you get that hybrid blend to work? And nobody really sort of seems to be talking about the fact that if you have a platform that connects everybody together, you can actually create a culture.
Yeah, and even better is that if let people empower the people to do what they want to do and give them the tools to build the communities they want to build, Um, I think there's a false sense of comfort in this whole thing around culture and loyalty and all that in terms of, you know, people singing the hymn of their business and all that kind of stuff, like in the old IBM commercials. And these days are gone. People will work and will stay with the businesses that cater to their needs and give them the rewards they expect for the good work they're doing, and vice versa, by the way. So I think if people really want this team, you know, building and being part of an office and go to the pub every night with their colleagues and all that, then they'll choose a place that does that. But it doesn't mean that you need to be that. Is also, you don't necessarily want that type of demographic either. Potentially, you have to deal with the hungover every morning.
Yeah. So it might be self-selecting anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just to wrap up then, what's coming up for Sensée in 2023? We're going into December now. It's right at the end of the year. Unbelievably, I think it's gone so fast this year. But what are the sort of CX or general business trends you're looking forward to next year?
I don't know if looking forward is the right word, but in terms of, I think the trend is still, people are, I think, still trying to figure out what is the makeup of their workplace of the future, is what they're calling it. Their work, and I think a lot of it as well is the workforce of the future. What does that look like? Because I think, again, we need to get to a point where we're empowering and giving people the freedom, but also that as a business, we have the means of ensuring that we can deal with the complications of that freedom and choice, right? So what we're looking forward to is, obviously, we've been the pandemic was an absolute kick in the butt for us to expedite the rebuilding of our app stack so that we could make them available to businesses, so they could have the same benefits that we've enjoyed over the last decade or so. And we do believe that there's an absolute need for these things, so that the CX in general, whether it's the people that drive the work or the customers themselves, all together can benefit from it, because you have people that are happier and more balanced in their workplace practices.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on there. And we recently had Open Assembly on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the future of work, and it very much fits into this whole idea of flexibility about location, but also flexibility around hours as well. So it's a lot more. It's a lot more than just work from home.
Absolutely. There's a it's very much about, and it's back to where it all started. Remember, a happy agent equals happy customers, and it's the same thing. It's just I think to get people to be happier is harder, and certainly, the economy and all those macroeconomic conditions that are happening are make things difficult, but equally it's still the same challenge. It's just we need to address it and find different types of solutions. But it means flexibility from a business point of view. And I hope that the pandemic, if anything, brought that, because it opened the eyes to many HR practitioners and op leaders out there, that there's more than having a building full of people.
Well, that's a great note to end on, and very positive. So, Steve, thanks very much for that.
You're most welcome. And again, thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.